about the source of Sorve and Mamale, how the source of them comes really from before the Tzimtzum. And basically what there is there's the dual nature of light, right? That they have light which is just there to reveal the essence and is completely beyond the worlds, nothing to do with the worlds. And inside that light, before the Tzimtzum, you have a light which is for the sake of shining into the worlds, which is presently completely nullified out of existence. That's why it's called the Esser Spheres HaGnuzos. They're hidden. But at the same time, there's Esser Spheros. And the only reason there's Esser Spheros is not obviously in order to reveal the essence of Hashem, because the essence of Hashem is not revealed by Esser Spheros. It's something immaterial to the essence of Hashem. So the whole purpose of it is to shine into the worlds. So even in the source, there's already an inyan of Gavul inside the Or Ein Sof, and that's why after the Tzimtzum, that light particularly has the ability to be mislavish into Kelim. Whereas the other light, even after the Tzimtzum and even after there's Kelim, it is not mislavish into the Kelim. It sits in the Kelim in a way of Makif, which means the Kelim have no experience of it whatsoever.
This is Sorve, this is not
Sorve.
Right.
We then said the same thing takes place. Another mashal is for can be found in the kochos of a person. Same exact thing, just be brought into a different mashal regarding the difference between will and the other 10 powers. That Ratzon is an inyan of Makif and Sovev. That what it is essentially is just the revelation of the soul itself, the Netiyas HaNefesh, what we call it the leaning of the soul. And since the soul is one, it's not compartmentalized, this Ratzon. It's just one simple Ratzon that has no divisions in it, no distinctions within itself. And then there's this 10 powers that are sort of carried inside the soul, that even in their source, they're not the soul, which is very strange, because if they're not the soul, what are they? The soul is one. But so we said, just like the 10 spheres HaGnuzos, they're there in a way that they're not really there. In other words, they don't blemish the simple oneness, even though there's something called 10 there, and there's like sort of multiplicity. It's in a state of nullity to the point that it does not interfere with the simple oneness. But it's there in some kind of a potential way.
How do they get there?
It's just like in Hashem's, go back to the first analogy, how did it get there? Because it's the kavanah of Hashem to reveal 10 spheres from His essence. Right? Hashem, just like He has the power to reveal infinity from Himself, He also has the power to reveal, and the kavanah to reveal finite from Himself. So it's sort of like the intention of Hashem to want to shine inside of worlds. It's a different kavanah, basically, something that it's not there to just reveal what Hashem is on His own. It's something that Hashem has a kavanah to do something else. So your soul has the same exact thing. It has a kavanah not to just be a soul, but to shine into a body. Right? So it's a different kavanah. It's not just the soul on its own. It's the interest of the soul to shine into a body. So even in its source, it already has the ability to shine into such a body. That's the power of limitation inside of the oneness, which is, again, not really, at that point, putting any limitations on the oneness. But once there'll be some kind of a tzimtzum, and then the body and the vessels, i.e. the limbs, appear. So it's those inner powers, those 10 spheros, which actually have the ability to climb inside of the limbs and enliven them. And therefore they have a whole difference between the head and the heart and the feet, etc. They all have chilukim and differences between them. Whereas, again, the will, when it comes into the body, it doesn't come into the body in a way where it distributes itself and compartmentalizes itself into the different limbs. It exists equally inside of all the limbs, because just like the Or Ein Sof, just like the Sovev light, it's essentially not there for the purpose of entering into a body. It's there for just revealing in the soul. So even when it does enter into a body, it doesn't mislavish into the body's limbs, and it remains makif to them. And that's why we said you can never really see a person's will. You can see the power of movement, you can see the power of sight, you can see the mind, so to speak, when they speak intelligently, but you can't see the will. The will is the underlying force which is making all those things go, but you never actually see it. So then we said, however, there is a sort of way to see the will, and that's when you make a blessing, right? The will is essentially the mitzvahs. The will of Hashem is inside of you, is the performance of the mitzvahs. So, whereas the Torah is compared to the other limbs. I'm just throwing this in now all of a sudden. This is the second part of the last chapter we worked on. That just like you have this Indian of Ratzon and Seichel, or Ratzon and other limbs, other powers inside of the human being, this is also a metaphor for Torah and mitzvahs above. So now we have the third thing on the table. You have Sorve and Mamale, Ratzon and Seichel, right, or Seichel all the way down into all the Panemius powers. And now mitzvahs and Torah. Right? And mitzvahs and Torah works the exact same way. That the Torah, in its source, it's already the chokhmah of Hashem. I.e., it's not Hashem himself, it's the interest of Hashem to sort of share his wisdom with you. It's already a separate entity other than Hashem inside of Hashem. Much like the 10 spheres of Ganuzos, much like the 10 powers of the soul, as they are carried inside the soul before the body is made. And you have the mitzvahs, which is the pure will of Hashem. It's there just to be the hisgalus of the will of Hashem. And therefore we said there's also, the mitzvahs are not delineated and separated, individualized like Torah is. And we also said another outcome of this is that when Torah comes down into you, when the tzimtzum will happen, and the Torah is mislavish into the guf, it actually becomes understood. It has the ability to extend itself into the kelim, because even in its source, it's already limited. Same exact story we've been telling, just now we're talking about Torah. Whereas in its source, it already has a power of gavul. Then when it will finally come in contact with a kli, it has the ability to go inside the kli. Whereas mitzvahs do not. Mitzvahs are the will of Hashem. Whenever a person is doing a mitzvah, you don't really understand what it is, and you're actually completely oblivious to the power of it upon you, because like makif, light, it's unable to be experienced. The only thing is, when you make a blessing on a mitzvah, that's the Indian of drawing out that will so that it can come to a state of gilui. So just to clarify that last point, Torah comes to a state of gilui almost naturally, because you can't fulfill the mitzvah of Torah unless you understand the Torah that you're learning. It automatically shows itself and invests itself into the vessels. Mitzvahs implicitly do not, intrinsically cannot, but with some kind of miraculous blessing of the mitzvah, means to be mamshich, that level of the ratzon, it can present itself and come out. It can. And in the future, we said it will be sort of all out. Like you'll see the ratzon, you'll see the underlying Sorve. It'll present itself. Even though right now, you can only see the externalities of a person, you can't see their will. The whole idea of the bracha of the mitzvah is that you can actually see the will. Some kind of miraculous state.
That's Mashiach, though, right?
Yeah.
And what we can't see with the mitzvah after...
But even now...
It's very limited.
Say it again?
What we do get to see after we do the mitzvah is still very limited in contrast to what we can see with Torah, right?
Yeah, I guess not exactly though. What he's trying to say is that when you make a bracha on a mitzvah, you're basically acknowledging that this action is a godly one. In other words, right now I'm doing the will of Hashem. In other words, you're not seeing with your eye, but you're basically like bringing recognition to the fact that you are doing a mitzvah right now. So you're sort of like, you're bringing attention to the fact that this is the will of Hashem that's about to come out, that's about to present itself. So again, it's a relatively small level of revelation compared to like seeing the Or Ein Sof, but that's the concept of the bracha of the mitzvah. Okay, that's what we said yesterday. Going into Zion here. You want one of these? Last one. Tzrich lahavin. We have to understand. The l'chora seemingly are indid the makif and panimi hamavur ba'maimer, which are explained in this maimer. We're all deep into a maimer from Ayin Beis, the Rebbe Rashab. These two inyanim, makif and panimi, that are explained there, shall zeh ba'hamashal deratzum b'seichel. And because we're busy trying to explain makif and panimi, we came to a mashal to try and understand it better of ratzon and seichel, right? The will and the intellect of a human being. And that's hu or mamale or sovev, and that's the idea of, seichel is mamale, ratzon is sovev. He says, "Umano geyakan levara achiluk bein Torah mitzvahs." Why do you all of a sudden bring in the Indian of Torah mitzvahs? In fact, it was a little bit stumbling when we just gave the review. It was like, okay, and by the way, there's Torah mitzvahs also. Like it wasn't seemingly such a flow. Why suddenly, if he's describing Sorve and Mamale, and he had a good mashal for it, which is Ratzon and Seichel, why suddenly does he bring in here the difference between Torah and mitzvahs? So first of all, we have to preface the fact that the whole creation is for the Torah and for the Jewish people. Right? Where do we find this? You look at footnote 45, he says, Perush Rashi on the beginning of Parshas Bereshis, right? The very first base of the Torah, Bereshis, is bishvil two things that are called Reshis. The Torah is called Reshis and the Jewish people are called Reshis. The whole Bereshis Bar Elokim is for the Torah and the Jewish people. So this is literally 101. So we're saying that the creation is for the Torah and the Jewish people. Hakavana bezeh hi lo rak lebrias haolam, ela gam lechol hagiloyim. We've discussed this before, but not in so much depth. So he's saying the purpose, what does it mean that the world was created for the Jewish people and for the Torah? It's not just the bria, like from bria and below, but all the giloyim were actually created for the Torah and the Jewish people. Gam lahagiloyim shlifnei atzimtzum. Gezun. Even the giloyim that came before the tzimtzum. In other words, even before there was even the ability to make a world, right? Before the tzimtzum, there's not even such a thing as a potential world, really, right? And nonetheless, everything that's going on there, which is seemingly Hashem's private business, which has nothing to do with creation, there's not even the space of the world yet. What he's saying now is that even there, all that's going on is only for the sake of the Jewish people and the Torah. This is a cosmic idea, basically. Little us down here, we're the Jewish people, right? Now, he's not talking about the Jewish people in the world of Atzilus. He's talking about Betzalel, right? Yidden in the world. The Or Ein Sof and the Esther Spheres Haganuzos are made for you. Like that's the purpose of them, of their existence. It's pretty crazy, actually. This is even like sort of just clarifying further the wackiness of this statement, the awesomeness of it, that even what we call the Giloy of the Or Ein Sof Habli Gavul, which is merely the revelation of the essence and is not there to shine into the worlds, even that is only there for the Torah and the Jewish people. Just to clarify, right? We said there's two types of lights. Right. There's like just the Or Ein Sof, who's just like the ability for Hashem to show His infinity, right? The Hashem is essential, right? And when He wants to sort of He can be in a state of showing that. It doesn't have to be showing it to somebody. It's just that it's revealed or it's not revealed. So you have this whole realm of just Hashem revealing to Himself the infinite nature of Himself forever, which we said by definition is beyond the ability of the worlds to ever experience. Why? Because that is an infinite nature, and the worlds are finite and have vessels to them. There's no way that could ever shine to us, and it's implicitly beyond our level, forever. And in a certain sense that it's not. It's intentionally designed to be irrelevant to us. Right? And if Hashem wants to make a light which will be relevant to us, we already said He has to sort of find this other light inside of Himself, which is the potential of 10 spheres, and eventually we can experience some godliness. And now what He's saying is that even that original light, its whole purpose of its existence is for the Jewish people and the Torah. Even though it's completely beyond experiencing.
That can't just mean that it's there in order to be a foundation for the other lights to come out of.
Well, if you think about it, even if you want to say that, still the only reason it's there is for us.
Right. But we're not talking. I guess we'll kind of continue going, but it doesn't seem like we're talking about a giloy of that.
No, we're not saying that we're necessarily going to experience that.
Right.
Although we're not saying we're not.
Right.
We're just saying that does not exist independently without its purpose being the Jewish people.
Right.
Right? Because as we said before, there's nothing mukhrach from Hashem. Hashem is not forced to do anything. Like we're saying, the sun reveals itself without having a choice, right?
Right.
It's like a luminary and it shines light. Hashem does not have to reveal himself. The fact that he shines the Or Ein Sof is a willful decision.
Right.
Why did he make that decision? Right? So what we're seeing is that even though making that decision seemingly is making a light which is completely beyond us ever experiencing, the reason for making that decision was for us. So if you want to say it's because that's going to be the home of the Or Panima that's going to come out of it, what have you? We can come up with probably infinite reasons. But the point is that even Hashem's decision to shine His own self infinitely in a way which is beyond all worlds was for the sake of Torah and the Jewish people.
Wow, that was like the plan. That was like the goal of creation.
That's all for us.
It's a small statement.
It's really not.
Translation for Giluim.
Revelation. Yeah, revelation. Okay, so the last line on the page. Sharei hakavana bechol hagiluim, because really the intention behind all the revelations, he bichdei al yadam, is that through them, yeh achar kach brias ha'olam, which is basically what you said. Is that through them, there will then be a creation of the world. In other words, he didn't need to make any revelations stam for their own sake. All of it is, the purpose is that it's eventually supposed to lead to the creation of the world. So then you have a big question, which is, why does he need to create a revelation which is something beyond the world's ability to ever experience? How is that for the sake of the world? Right, so he says, "V'gama gilu she'einu lahayir es ha'olamos." Even the revelation which is not there to shine into the worlds, ela gilu ha'etzem, but like we're saying, this revelation of the essence itself, hu lefi shekach al b'ratzono yisbarech. It's because, he's explaining the answer right now. It's because so it went up in Hashem's mind, sha'or ha'shayach la'olamos yumshach ma'or shelamayla mishayach la'olamos. That the light which will be relevant for the worlds should specifically be drawn out from a place which is beyond light, which is relevant for the world. Right? In other words, so you could say, like, well, why would he make a light that's completely never experienceable by the worlds? What is that? Why is that for the worlds? And it's exactly what you said. Because he wanted to bring out the light of the worlds from a light which is completely beyond relevancy to the worlds. So he says, look at a footnote, he says, look at a mimer I wrote somewhere else. What we spoke about it already. What's the reason for that? I think we mentioned it in a previous class here a few days ago. Why did he want to make the light of the worlds come out of an infinite light which is beyond the worlds? In other words, what was his alternative? Hashem could have, since this whole thing is like a willful process, and the whole thing is only happening in order to make the worlds, it's a very simple question. Why didn't Hashem just bring out the Esher Shviras HaGenuzos, period, and make the worlds with light that was relevant to the worlds? Why did he make an infinite light which was beyond relevancy to the world, only to contract that light, put it away, and from it bring out a light which is relevant to the worlds? Why like the rigmarole? Why not just make a light which the worlds can experience? That's a question of this other mimer. You understand the question? What's the reason? You learned that other mimer with me. What's that? Contrast?
It would be it'd be a very mundane world. There'd be no drive to reach the highest. Wouldn't it be?
If you told me that Hashem could have just made this physical world without any of the spiritual dimensions involved, he could have, and if you would have told me that that's what he would have done, I would agree with your statement that there would be no drive, there would be no striving, because there would be only this world, and there would be no sort of source of the world that we would like sort of be able to picture the way Hashem made the world, and we just sort of be locked into this little small consciousness. So that's not going to work. But for that, he could have just made the Esher Shviras HaGenuzos and the infinite line of Seder Yishtalshlus to get to here, and eventually made Gashmis out of Ruchnias. So that would have been covered by just the 10 Shviras HaGenuzos. Why does he need to make infinite light, which is completely irrelevant to the world, only to remove it and then bring back? True is always the answer. only to bring back that very light and make the worlds with it again. In other words, what did he accomplish by that?
But he is infinite. So anything he would create would be...
Oh, that's a limitation on him, then you're saying. And he doesn't have limitations.
A limitation that
he has to be infinite. He can bring out whatever he wants. We already discussed, even his bringing out his infiniteness was a choice he made. He doesn't have to be infinite.
So what? No free will? Is that what we're saying?
No, we would for sure have free will. We still have Gashmias. and we wouldn't see the Or Eloki that's enlivening us. That's what gives us free will, that we don't see.
Then we would, right?
I'm saying if you don't need the Or Ein Sof to be there in order for free will to
No,
happen.
I'm saying, but if you were able to see that which is not seeable at the moment, then won't you lose
Yes,
a
but
big
that's
part of your free will?
yes, but that's not really what we're saying right now.
But that very essence that you're talking about, he wanted us to have it. Part of him.
Right, but we can't experience it. Right? So that's the thing, it's completely beyond our comprehension. Although that's not a bad answer in its own right. In other words, what we're saying is in Mashiach times, somehow that light is going to come back into the picture. So in a certain sense, you could say it's like the reward. But really, the way he answers the question over there, and it's connected with the fact that it's the reward, is in the following way. If that light would not have been the source of our light, of creation, then there would be only a certain measure of bittul. We mentioned this the other day. Only a certain measure of bittul that the creation would be able to arrive at. Right? Because if think about it like this for a second. The Or Ein Sof, which doesn't recognize our existence, it's impossible for it to recognize our existence. It's not limited. Therefore, it doesn't even have us in mind, right? It's not for the sake of shining into the world. A bittul that comes from that light is much more significant than a bittul that would come from what's called the 10 spheres hagenuzos. Why? Because the 10 spheres hagenuzos, the whole purpose of them is that they do recognize the existence of the worlds. They're made in the number 10 in order so that eventually the 10 will be isolated and be able to invest itself inside of vessels and create worlds. So what does it come out to? That our nullity before this light can never be absolute and total. Because the light itself recognizes us. Right? It recognizes, and therefore how empty can we make ourselves when this very source of our existence takes us into account?
That's exactly what I wanted to say.
That's what you wanted to say. Now I'm seeing now
Just
that
wanted to articulate so much more.
I see what you're saying now. Now I said it, I see what you meant there.
Essentially like that.
But the point is that if, right, in other words, for example, if, put it like this, right, another way we speak about this a lot, in terms of, one might walk into this room and say like, what are you guys talking about? This is completely irrelevant to everything under the sun, right? Which I get that a lot. But the idea is that, what are we doing, right? What is the process that we're undertaking here? This is not, you could say, well, Torah, it helps you, it fixes your character, it makes you a better person. Like, why are we learning Hasidus at the end of the day? Ultimately, it's utility for us in some way, right? But we're talking about things that have nothing to do with us. So the idea is that there's two ways of dealing with yourself. And we basically, the difference between Chokhmah and Bina, this is sort of just a way of putting it out there. Or you could say the Or Ein Sof and the Esrei Shviras HaGenuzos. It's easier if you say Chokhmah and Bina. Right? So when you talk about Bina is called Eim Habanim Smecha. It's the mother of the children. The children are your midos. When you're meditating on your own midos and how to fix them, right? It's definitely better than not meditating on your midos and not fixing them. But how much are you going to able to sort of bring them to a state of nullity when the force that is trying to nullify them is constantly thinking about them? You're never going to be able to uproot them from their existence when the power that you're using to do that has them in mind and is constantly reminding them of their own existence. You're meditating on sort of self-help, right? If the real self-help will come, let's just say there's a premise here that Hasidus holds that bittul and removing yourself from the conversation is the highest way of healing yourself. If you're busy constantly thinking about yourself, I have to be better, I have to do this, I have to stop doing this, I need to which is basically a type of meditation which is thinking about yourself. Even if you're going to perfect yourself at that level, you're still going to be a self. Because the power you're using to undo yourself has your own self in mind and is thinking about yourself. So the ultimate way to achieve it, bittul, if that is in fact the highest level of self-refinement, is that you just sort of disappear in your own self and something higher is able to channel through you, then you have to use a tool which doesn't even recognize yourself. And that is basically what we're doing all day long over here. You're meditating on something where you're not the object of the discussion. And not only are you not the object of the discussion you're having is talking about a place where you don't exist in it. Like there's no you there.
You're using yourself to course correct or you're not. If you're not using yourself to course right? And you don't have Ayin mind, so where this external power, this strange power, is coming from where? Not from you. So then how are you? You're not doing any of the work.
No, in other words, it's somehow coming from you, but what's happening is right now we're talking about the Or Ein Sof Habli Gavul. In that place, we're going to really meditate about that place. There's an interesting little caveat to that place, is that in it, there's no existence of anything except for Hashem. Not you, not the world, not the higher worlds. So at that moment when you're meditating on something where it doesn't even recognize your existence, then truly that level has the power to nullify you out of existence. Or if you're going to meditate on something which, even if it's at a high light, but it's the source of 10 spheros, you're never going to get to a point where you are able to be out of the picture altogether. Because the tool that you're using, the power of godliness that you're using, recognizes your existence. You can't remove it from yourself. And so this is the point of the whole conversation, going back to the beginning. Why did Hashem create the world from an infinite light, when seemingly it's not really, it's no use to it? He just removed that light anyway to make the worlds. It's because the worlds were born to begin with inside of a place where they were in a state of absolute nullity. They were like non-existent. And therefore, even when they come into existence now, they already have in them a hechsher, he calls it. It's a hechsher, it's like a preparedness to be able to actually reach a level, not just to the peak of their existence, which would be the 10 spheres of Haganuzos, which would still basically give them a certain very high level of importance in their own estimation. That's not really a bittul. On the contrary, you're saying, like, if I go to my real source, I'm like God almost, right? Like the source of the world is really these 10 spheros of such high. On the contrary, the source of the world is, there is no such thing as the world. It's complete absence of existence. That gives the world a bittul. And since the world was fashioned in that way, it's not something that you have to add on to the world. The world has to sort of learn. It's already the truth of the world. The world came from a place where it began as nothing. And therefore it can achieve that nothingness and reach that, become a kli for the true infinite to shine through it. If it would have been created from the Esrei spheres of Ganuzos, it would never been able to access that level of light.
But how does it achieve it on its own without using that little I component? Talking about man now.
Torah and
It's
mitzvahs.
intrinsic.
Torah and mitzvahs. That's what we're getting to here, right? You can't do it from, this was the previous conversation that we spent so much time on. You can't do it from your own work as a created being. You have to be thrown some kind of a tool which is not from the creation, right? And with that, if you nullify yourself to that tool, and as you make yourself an entire Torah, then the Torah has the ability to access these levels.
It's a raft.
Okay,
Wow.
the choppers are coming.
There's no way we could do this on our own.
No.
Like we could just kind of concoct some kind of.
No, that as best you could do is you can get to the source of the creation, which again does not really nullify you. It actually could do the opposite. It could make you very arrogant to realize like how high your own source comes
Right.
from.
This is kind of the real like misstep in like all other forms of worship and religion.
Yeah, in a certain
Yeah.
sense, idol worship basically.
Without Torah and mitzvahs. I mean, even
Is the source like many,
Well, it's
or is
like-
the source one?
No, but
right?
it's like even with idol worship, like you're still like kind of doing an aspect of ayin where you're like bowing down like yourself before something else in the worship of
Ayin
that.
worship.
But the problem is that you're like there's no reason for you to do that except for serving your own self-interest. So like Torah and mitzvahs are like the ultimate bittul in that regard.
Yeah.
There's no you don't do Torah and mitzvahs so that you can directly like.
Or get light in the
Right.
world to come. As I'm tapping into your earlier conversation.
Totally. Yeah.
Torah mitzvah to Torah mitzvah and prayer.
Yeah, throw a prayer in there.
Prayer on
All right.
Prayers and mitzvahs.
That's not
though.
some,
Right.
that's a selfish reason. Like if you're doing Torah mitzvahs so you can get more light in the world to come.
That is somewhat of a selfish reason. So
I mean,
that's
like,
It's
like
a
the,
much higher
defi-
self-interest
like-
reason.
it's the
Like,
definition
not
of
bad.
it's the definition of lo l'shem shemayim.
Uh-huh.
To serve Hashem, not for the sake of heaven.
I would call it the definition.
I think it is actually the definition.
But that's not like why we do it.
Right,
To receive a reward.
right. Okay, so al pi zeh, let's go on. Al pi zeh yesh lomar. No, we skipped a line. Back right after those brackets there.
Yeah.
So, right. So we were saying essentially that all the giluim, even the giluim that are beyond creation, are for the sake of Torah and Yisrael, and the reason Hashem made So if you ask, well, what does it have to do with us? It's for the reason we just said, that everything should come from the state of pure bittul. That the world should emanate from a place of infinite oneness. The Kevan Shabrias HaOlam, Hu Bishvil HaTorah Bishvil Yisrael. And since the creation of the world is for the Torah and the Jewish people, Nim Shekol Gam Kol HaGiloim Hem Bishvil Torah Bishvil Yisrael. Therefore, all the revelations, even the revelations which are beyond us in their very nature, they're really for us in the Torah. Okay, Al Pi Zeh Yesh Lomar. Accordingly, we could say, Da'atam HaPanimi Al Zeh Shenim Shechu Shnei HaGiloim Sorve Mamale. That the real reason that it was drawn out to begin with from Hashem, Sorve and Mamale, these two levels of light, infinite, and the source of the 10 spheres, Haganuzos, which is Giloy Etzem and Giloy Shelahayir Ha'olamos, which is two levels of light. We said the revelation of the essence to itself, and the Giloy that's there to shine into the world, Sorve Mamale. Why did Hashem bring these out in the first place? Hu mipnei shebetorah v'Yisrael yesh dugmas shnei inyanim eile. It's because in the Jewish people and in Torah you have these two things. In other words, we had a very similar conversation in a mimer we learned about Yud Gimel Tammuz not so long ago, where, if you recall, we said that there's these three levels of love, like b'chol levavecha, b'chol nafshecha, b'chol miyodecha, and we said that these three things were not the product of the three levels of light above, which we at that time were describing as like the Sorve and the Mamale and the going into vessels, I believe, right? Where like there's basically two levels of, it was poor, right, and then someone whose needs are met,
right,
and then versus someone who's rich.
We actually called it the Ayin Sof, the third light.
Okay, so
Distinguishing Sorve.
we had this three levels, and we said over there, right, that don't look at it as though, these three loves are coming to describe those three levels of lights. It's the other way around. That those three levels of lights, the purpose of them is because the whole purpose of reality is the Yidden, then those three lights, and understanding them, help us understand those three levels of love in a Jew. In other words, what's the cause and what's the effect over here is the exact opposite of what we thought. We think that there's like this huge cosmos, and we're just like sort of like little miniature versions of it that are happy to even understand that we can tap into like these great metaphors and know our source. The shocking truth is that the whole purpose of the cosmos is because inside of this little microcosm we have this way that we tick, and the whole creation around us has to be fashioned in a certain way because of us. So what he's saying now is a very similar concept, that the reason Hashem created existence with an infinite light and then with an Esser Spheres Haganuzos light is because something like that will exist in His precious Torah and Israel when He finally creates the world, and we're going to therefore have to have we're going to have these two levels inside of us. Therefore, we're going to have access to these infinite powers of creation that are beyond us. And it was that we're the cause and they're the effect. So this is why Hashem made those types of lights in that way, because you find an example of them in Torah and Israel. The real, I guess, point of the matter, which we could sort of take home, is that Hashem wanted to make it in such a way that when you do something, you automatically have the ability to have an effect on the entire existence. In other words, it's not the access of what you're able to change. It says in Rambam, for example, a person will do one good deed, he can tip the whole scale of the world for good and bring Mashiach by himself. How is that possible? You're sitting over there talking to Sally, helping her across the street. Like, what does that have to do with the existence? So he's saying, since the whole existence is is patterned after you, therefore Hashem made it specifically in such a way that what you do accesses every single place. There's no you're not like one small little detail of creation which is removed from the klal of creation, right? You have the entirety of creation inside of you, and therefore your actions are cosmically effective. It's a little bit more responsibility than maybe you wanted. Okay. So, going on. D'shnei inyanim eile b'Torah hem Torah and mitzvahs. That where do you see this two dual level of light in the realm of Torah? We say there's Torah and Yisrael. So in Torah, where do you see this? It has a dual nature. You have Torah and mitzvahs. Right? There's two parts of Torah, Torah and mitzvahs. Yisrael hem seichel v'ratzon. And when it comes to the Jewish people, you also have these two things, which we already mentioned, seichel and ratzon. And now we can understand the question that Rabbi had before. Like, why, when he was busy explaining Sorve and Mamale, did he bring two examples to explain it? Seichel and ratzon in a man, and Torah and mitzvahs. Right. And he's now basically answering that question because the reason for Sorve and Mamale is because of Torah and Yisrael. He therefore brought an example of Sorve and Mamale inside of Yisrael and inside of the Torah. This is kind of a footnote here of interesting. So he says basically, well, what do you might say to yourself, well, wait a second, Jewish people aren't the only ones with will and intellect. All humankind. So he says here, what's that? You might say that, but you might not after this little bracket. So he says, Zeh shebenefesh ha'adam yesh seichel umidos, hu be'ikar be'Yisrael. The fact that inside of a soul of a human being, you have something called intellect and emotions, really, that exists primarily in the Jewish people. Adam, atem kroim Adam. It says, the word Adam refers specifically to the Jewish people. You're called Adam, as opposed to the rest of humankind. It's just that what? From this point that the Yid has humankind, and he's made in the image of God, from here it's sort of a nishtalshel, it comes out that also other human beings are made in this way, essentially to give free choice. Because as the Friedrich Rebbe says, all kinds of things I'm maybe not going to say right now, but he says that essentially if we were the only people, if Jewish people were the only humans, then it would also be sort of a limitation of free choice. We would recognize our superiority over all of the animal kingdom and so forth, and we would realize that we were like sort of the chosen species, and it would take away this like true free choice. So Hashem, really the whole inyan of being a human is the inyan of being a Yid, is that Hashem made others that have seichel and midos to parallel us in order to give free choice. That's what he's saying here. The ikar inyan of seichel and midos is in Yisrael. Shocking statement, maybe something you want to keep in your pocket, but it's what Chassidus says.
What's this word?
Atem kruyin, which means like to call. You're called Adam. There's four names of person: Adam, Ish, Enosh, and Gever. Right? And basically, only Atem kruim Adam. The real Adam, which is like the totality of the human species, is basically Atem kruim Adam. It's called by Yidden, are called Adam. That name is not given to other people.
Or something like that.
Enosh and Gever. Okay, out of the parentheses. Al pi zeh yesh lomar. Accordingly, we can say, Tezeh shemevi ba'amaymer mashal al Sorve u'Mamale miratzon v'seichel sheba Adam. This that he brings a metaphor trying to describe Sorve and Mamale from using ratzon and seichel inside of a person, will and intellect inside of a person. Ubehemshech lezeh, and as he continues, bir achiluk bein mitzvahs v'Torah, he goes on and explains the difference between mitzvahs and Torah. Hu gam bichdei l'ramez shashoresh l'shnei hagiluim. It's also in order to hint to us that the root of these two giluim, that where does Sorve and Mamale come from? The root of them, Gilei Etzem, i.e., and Gilei Shelahayra Olmos, the two levels of revelation. One is the infinite revelation to itself, and one is the revelation to shine into something else. Hu dugmas shnei inyanim eilish b'Torah Yisrael. The reason he brings them all in one continuation there is to hint that the root of these two levels of godly light is that they are found inside of the Torah of the Jewish people. That's where they come from. In other words, meaning what? That what really is going on here is a new level we haven't discussed yet, which is the essence. We haven't really talked so much about that. That the essence is really where the Torah and the Jewish people come from. We come from the essence. The Torah comes from the essence. And therefore, when the Torah and the Jewish people show themselves, we are a revelation of the essence. And just like the essence has two forms of revelation, right? Or actually, it's not really like that. The reason why the essence has two forms of revelation is because Yidden and the Torah are the essence, and they have two forms of revelation. We can reveal ourselves in the sense of makif, ratzon, which is like this unseen underlying force which controls the whole organism without being seen. And we have kochos, which is the aspect of life force which is vested into the vessels. Torah and is the same. Torah has the idea of mitzvahs, which is this sort of underlying essential life force which is beyond investiture, and it has Torah, which can be invested and grasped. So since Torah and Yidden are essence, and when they present themselves, this is how they present it. They have these two things inside of them. Therefore, the essence itself, when it revealed itself, it revealed these two levels of light. In other words, that it's not so much the revelation of the essence, it's the revelation of Torah and Yisrael, which is the essence. You follow that?
And it all kind of comes together.
It's crazy. V'zeh mosif ba'avanas ilu d'shnei giluim hanal. And yeah.
Does that mean that all like Mamale and Sorve came out just for this purpose?
Yeah.
That's what we keep saying, but like in order to kind of...
Yeah, that's what we're saying.
We keep making like these mushrooms on mushrooms on mushrooms to kind of create, like kind of cement the fact. It's like and this, and this, and this, and Torah and mitzvahs are two different ways. It's amazing.
V'zeh mosif ba'avanas ha'ilui d'shnei giluim hanal. This ultimately adds to the understanding of how high these two giluim are. Sheish b'hem lo rak inyan ha'gilui, elagam dugmas la'inyanim d'Torah v'Yisrael sheshorsham hu ba'atzmus. So basically, what we're doing here is like turning the tables on them. At first, we're trying to use the Jewish people and the Torah to show how high these things were, same as the mechanism we used in the other mimer. And now it turns the other way. We're actually showing how great these Giluim are. That they bear a resemblance to these two things in the Jewish people and in the Torah who comes from the Atzmus. So we're now not priding the Jewish people in the Torah that they have something like these lights. We're priding these lights that they have something like the Jewish people in the Torah have who come from the essence. So these lights all of a sudden can recognize in and of themselves that they're not just Giluim. They're Giluim of the essence. In other words, they're not just light. They're actually presenting what the essence is in these two fashions.
But is there a difference between the essence and the Ein Sof? The Etzem and the Ein Sof?
No, we asked that yesterday.
Right, yeah. So just to kind of clarify that for that statement. So even though they're coming from the Ein Sof, which is clear in the sense of like, they're coming from the Ten Sfiros, so the Sorve is actually coming directly from there.
Say that again? They're
Like,
coming from the Ein Sof, you said.
The Ein Sof.
Yeah.
Right. Both of them are coming from the Ein Sof.
Okay.
So now we're saying that we can draw the conclusion that they come from the Etzem because the Yehudim and the Torah come from the Etzem?
Right, 'cause since the Yid and the Torah comes from the Etzem, right? And we show that we have these two types of things coming out of us, right? So you can now identify that these lights are actually presenting something that comes from the essence. Just like the Jew is essential, and the way he shows his essence is with these two levels of Gilui in his own self, Ratzon and Seichel,
Right.
etc. So when you go up and you look at these two levels of lights, it based on their similarity to the Jew, you can see that these are two presentations of something essential. It shows on them that they're both two different forms of Gilui Etzem. When they compare, when you see that they're also existing, that they're really metaphors of the Giluim and the Yid, and the Yid is essential, it sort of highlights that they are essential. They are presenting the essence.
Is there a chiddush here, or is this kind of just like a different way?
It's just before we were just assuming that these things came out of Hashem's essence,
right?
But we never really said that they are the presentation. This is what the essence has inside, right? In other words, this is the essence. It's the ability to be infinite and the ability to be finite, right? They themselves, I guess, literally on a level where these lights have a sort of they have themselves a consciousness, obviously, right? If we have a consciousness down here in this little place, the Or Ein Sof certainly is like aware of itself, let's say, in a certain sense, right? Or it's aware of God, let's say. But it has a being to it, right? And what we're saying is when they will have a look at our being and realize that they're Jew-like or they're Torah-like in that they're two prongs of the Yid himself, they all of a sudden have a hamshacha from the Atzmus. They're like, whoa, we come from the essence all of a sudden. They get a pickup from the fact they realize that they come from the essence. Whereas when they're in their own little place, they're just delighting in their own giluim. They're not really having an experience of the essence. Even though they're a gilui of the essence, this is maybe an important point to slip in here. Even though they're a gilui of the essence, they're actually not experiencing the essence. Because the second you come out of the essence and shine, you're now out of the essence and shining infinitely. But you're no longer in the essence.
Are they trying to draw back themselves?
They're trying, but they're not. The point is there's the essence and its revelations. There's the light of the sun and there's the sun.
Right.
When you're the light of the sun, you're all about being sunshine, but you're not the sun. Right? And so is true with the Giluim. But they get an access to the essence when they look down at the Yidden and like, oh, we are actually basically products of the essence. And in doing so, they experience a sort of hamshacha from the essence. Right? They realize that they are part of the essence as opposed to just shining outward from the essence.
Creations of some kind.
Yeah, just exactly, some being giluim. So it's actually, they get an aliyah from realizing that they are in the dugma, an example of ratzon and seichel of a yid.
Wow.
It's pretty highfalutin stuff going on over here. We're falutin all over the place.
Falutin left and right over here.
I kind of feel like we should leave this till tomorrow, to be honest with you. I don't know. We have a little bit more time.
We made it to the end of Zion.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
we've started Ches.
Yeah, let's hold here. It's a lot of information for one day there. Okay.
Thank you. Awesome.
Okay.
Awesome.
It's nice to show your self-worth.
I just realize you're the essence of God. Not bad.